I still remember the first time his mother looked at me like I was nothing. Not someone. Not even someone trying. Just nothing. Like a smudge on her perfect world she couldn't wait to wipe away. My name is Amira. And once upon a time I believed love could overcome anything. Even the cold stares of a family that didn't think I was good enough to stand at their dinner table. I met Daniel when I was 23. I was working 2 jobs. One at a wellness clinic by day and bartending at night to make rent. He came in for a vitamin 4 drip and left with my number written on a napkin. I almost didn't give it to him. Guys like him, buttoned up, expensive wristwatch, quiet entitlement. They didn't usually see girls like me. But Daniel did. Or so I thought. Our first date was a rooftop sushi bar. He made me laugh. He asked about my dreams. He told me mine were beautiful and that he wanted to be a part of building them. That night, under the stars, I believed him. Things moved fast. In 6 months we were serious. I was spending weekends at his downtown loft. His friends started inviting me out. He said he couldn't imagine his life without me. Then came the dinner. The night I met his family. They lived in a gated community so polished it looked like the sidewalks had been waxed. His mother opened the door and paused just long enough to take me in. I wore my best navy dress, tied my hair into a low bun and even wore pearls, trying desperately to present myself as enough. She didn't say hello. Just turned, heels clicking, and called over her shoulder, "Dinner's in the formal dining room." His father barely acknowledged me. His sister didn't even glance up from her phone. And Daniel? He squeezed my hand once and whispered, "They're just formal. Don't take it personally." But I did. Because you can always feel when a room wants you to disappear. The evening was a masterclass in condescension. They asked where I went to school, then politely nodded when I said a community college. His mother mentioned how charity work was fulfilling, and glanced at me as though to say, "You wouldn't know about that, would you?" And when Daniel told them we were planning to move in together, his mother put down her fork, folded her napkin and said, "Are you sure, darling? A man like you has options." I laughed nervously. No one else did. That was the beginning. What followed were months of subtle cuts. Last-minute party invitations that never reached me. Family photos taken while I was conveniently at the spa. Vacations I only heard about after the fact. And Daniel? He always had excuses. They don't mean anything by it. They just need time. Don't push it. And like a fool I didn't. I swallowed every slight. Smiled through every backhanded compliment. I loved him and I thought if I just showed up enough, loved enough, they'd change. But people don't change for those they've already decided to look down on. When he proposed, it was on a private beach in Tulum. Sunset, champagne, rose petals. It was perfect, until we returned to the hotel and I saw the text on his phone while he was in the shower. From his mother, "I can't believe you're actually marrying that girl. This is beneath you." I didn't cry that night. I just stared at the ceiling while he slept beside me, wondering what exactly I was doing. Trying to force my way into a life that was already rejecting me like a bad organ transplant. But I told myself love was enough. That maybe, just maybe, once I became his wife they'd see me differently. I was wrong. And I didn't even know how wrong. Until the wedding. Weddings are supposed to be about love, unity, celebration. But mine felt like a performance staged for people who hated their leading lady. From the very beginning his mother hijacked everything. The guest list? She revised it behind my back, cutting half my relatives because the venue was intimate. The colors I picked? Too loud, she said. She swapped them for muted pastels I didn't even like. And the dress? Don't get me started. She insisted I visit her friend's boutique, pressured me into a gown that made me feel like a doll, not a bride. Daniel, he didn't fight for me. He told me to pick my battles. But when every moment becomes a battle, when every dream you have is silenced or replaced, what are you even left with? The morning of the wedding I sat in a cold bridal suite, staring at myself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman in white. My makeup was flawless. My hair pinned in waves. But the light in my eyes? Gone. My best friend Layla stood behind me fixing my veil. She didn't say much, just squeezed my shoulder. She could feel it too. That I wasn't walking into a marriage. I was walking into war. I'll never forget the walk down the aisle. Every eye in the room was on me, but none of them were warm. The air felt stiff with judgment. I saw his sister nudge her friend and whisper something behind her hand. His mother didn't even smile. Only Daniel looked at me like I was something sacred. For a fleeting moment I believed it. That maybe despite it all our love was real enough to drown out the noise. But after the vows, when we stepped into the reception, I heard it. "She cleaned up well," his aunt said. Like I was a mess before. Like this version of me was barely acceptable. I swallowed the hurt. I danced, I toasted, I smiled. I told myself, this is your family now. You'll find a way to belong. But the truth was they'd already decided I didn't. The months after the wedding were the worst. His mother would call and accidentally forget I was on speaker. She'd ask Daniel if I was still trying that little side business of hers, as if my marketing agency wasn't gaining real traction. His sister would post family brunch photos. Everyone but me. Daniel brushed it off as just how they are. But it wasn't just them. It was him too. Because slowly my husband stopped defending me. He stopped noticing. When I told him I felt invisible, he told me I was overreacting. When I cried into his chest, he patted my back like I was a child who scraped her knee. And when I finally landed my biggest client, a national skincare brand launching a global campaign, I came home beaming, excited to celebrate. He barely looked up from his laptop. "That's cool. Don't let it distract you from your wifely duties." My wifely duties. I stood in the kitchen, still holding the champagne bottle I had bought to celebrate. I watched him scroll, completely unfazed by my success. And it hit me like a freight train. He didn't love me for who I was. He loved me for how small I made myself for him. Because somewhere along the way I stopped shining so he could feel bright. I stopped dreaming so he could dream bigger. I stopped asking so he'd never have to give. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Not after everything I had built. Not after what I knew I was capable of. So that night I made a decision. I would stop asking to be accepted. I would stop begging to be chosen. I would rise. Quietly. Strategically. Powerfully. It started small. I moved my home office to a studio space downtown. I hired a team of freelancers. I took on more clients. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped shrinking. Daniel noticed. At first he joked about it. Called me boss lady in a mocking tone. Then he got irritated when I worked late. Accused me of putting career before marriage. But I didn't bite. I didn't argue. I just worked. And it paid off. 6 months in, my agency was signing deals faster than I could scale. I started consulting for brands twice the size of Daniel's firm. I was featured in a business magazine. My name was starting to matter. And suddenly his family noticed. His mother called, pretending she cared about my work. Asked if I could speak at her charity event. His sister tagged me in a post, calling me an inspiration. People who once saw through me now wanted to be seen beside me. But the turning point? That was still to come. And when it did, the people who once dismissed me would watch the girl they called not enough take everything they thought she couldn't have. Success didn't make me bitter. It made me clear. I finally saw what I'd been blind to for so long. I wasn't married to a man who loved me. I was married to a man who needed me small so he could feel big. It became undeniable the night of his promotion party. Daniel had just been promoted to senior partner at his firm. And of course his mother planned a lavish dinner at their country club. Everyone was there, executives, family, old friends. It should have been a proud moment for both of us. Instead it was the night everything cracked wide open. I walked in wearing a crimson power suit, one that hugged me like confidence. My hair was pinned high, my heels tall, and my head held even higher. My presence was no longer the shadow of someone's wife. I was a storm that didn't need to be announced. The moment I stepped into that room, heads turned, including Daniel's. But not in awe. In irritation. He pulled me aside near the bar, his smile tight. "What are you wearing?" he hissed. "Confidence," I whispered back. "I thought you'd recognize it." He didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He just stared, jaw clenched, as if my success offended him. Later that night, his firm's managing director approached me. He had heard of my agency, complimented my recent campaign, said she was looking for fresh minds to handle their upcoming rebranding. I smiled, gracious and poised. I'd love to discuss it further. Daniel didn't say a word on the way home, but the silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. By morning the gloves came off. He started throwing jabs. Subtle ones at first. Don't forget who paid your way in the beginning. Your little wins don't mean you run the world. Then it turned venomous. He mocked my work, belittled my staff, even accidentally canceled a pitch meeting by telling my assistant I'd be unavailable. When I confronted him, he said I was being paranoid. But I wasn't. He couldn't stand that I had become everything he said I wasn't. And he was unraveling. One night I came home from a panel event, still buzzing from the energy in the room. I had been the keynote speaker. People lined up afterward to shake my hand. I felt alive. Daniel was waiting in the living room. A drink in his hand. His eyes bloodshot. You love the spotlight, don't you? He spat. You eat up all that attention like it validates you. I stood there in my heels, makeup still flawless, trophies still shining in my bag. No, I said, calm but firm. I don't need it to validate me. It reflects what you tried to erase. He laughed bitterly. Don't pretend you got here without me. I tilted my head. I didn't. I got here in spite of you. That night I slept in the guest room. The next morning I called a lawyer. It took 6 months to finalize the divorce. 6 months of icy breakfasts, passive-aggressive silences, and watching a man who once promised me forever try to sabotage what I'd built. He tried to claim part of my business. He failed. Because I had separated every asset early on. He never thought it would be worth anything. So he never touched it. Funny how the things people underestimate grow the strongest roots. When it was finally over, I didn't cry. I stood in front of the courthouse, signed the last paper, and walked straight into a coffee shop where my team was waiting for our next client pitch. Because life doesn't pause for heartbreak. Especially when your heart finally learns to beat for itself. 6 months later, I was invited back to that same country club. This time as the keynote speaker for a women's leadership summit. The same place his family once threw a party for his success, now hosting a celebration of mine. I walked in wearing the same red suit. Daniel's mother was there, seated in the audience. His sister too. And as I spoke, about resilience, about rising when you've been pushed down, about becoming everything they said you'd never be, I saw something shift in their eyes. Recognition. Regret. Respect. I didn't need it. I didn't ask for it. But it came anyway. Because real power, it doesn't come from revenge. It comes from becoming. The moment I stopped needing their approval, I found freedom. And in that freedom I found momentum. After the summit, things accelerated in ways I never imagined. My agency, once a one-woman freelance hustle in my tiny spare room, was now operating out of a downtown office. Clients came knocking. Brands that once turned their backs now begged for strategy sessions. I wasn't just working with companies anymore. I was building them. And yet, for all the success, the whispers still followed me. Not from strangers. From people who used to know me. People from Daniel's side, from the country club set, who once called me the trophy wife with ideas. They watched me rise, and instead of celebrating, they speculated. She must have had help. She's only this successful because she was married to Daniel. If she were really that smart, she wouldn't have needed to marry rich. But I didn't answer them with words. I answered with results. We launched a campaign for a struggling luxury brand that was on the verge of folding. Within 2 quarters, sales had doubled. A national newspaper picked it up. My name was printed under the headline, "The Woman Who Revived a Dying Legacy." I didn't smile for the cameras, I stared down the lens. Because I wanted every woman who'd ever been told she was nothing to know what nothing looks like when it builds an empire. And still, karma had one more twist in store. I was on a flight to LA for a tech conference when I saw his name flash on my phone. Daniel. I stared at it for a second. Not in pain. Not even in anger. In disbelief. I let it ring. But when the same number called again 3 days in a row, I answered. Hello. There was silence on the line. Then a familiar breath. I saw your campaign. It's everywhere. I didn't respond. He continued, I wanted to say congratulations. I almost laughed. Not out of cruelty. Out of how surreal it was. The man who once told me I'd never be more than his shadow, now calling me from the sidelines of a life I built without him. Thank you, I said simply. I was wondering, he hesitated, maybe we could talk. Grab coffee or something. And there was the moment every story leads to. The return of the man who thought he'd never lose you. I exhaled slowly. Daniel, I think you're mistaking this version of me for the one you left behind. We're not the same. And there's no coffee strong enough to bridge that distance. He said nothing. And I ended the call. That conversation didn't hurt. It healed something. It reminded me that the girl who once cried herself to sleep over his absence no longer lived here. In her place stood a woman who no longer begged to be seen, because now the world watched. Months later, I stood in front of a crowd at my company's 5-year anniversary gala. My parents were there. My team. The clients who believed in me. I wore a custom gown stitched with gold thread, because I wanted to feel like royalty that night. Not because of the dress, but because I had finally crowned myself. As I stood at the mic, I didn't tell the story of heartbreak. I told the story of rebuilding. Of finding power in silence. Of reclaiming yourself piece by piece until there's no one left to rescue, because you saved yourself. The room rose in applause. But the moment that made me pause was when I looked out into the crowd and saw women, some young, some older, nodding through tears. Because they knew. They'd lived it. They were still living it. And maybe my story gave them permission to rise too. Because that's what this was always about. Not him. Not revenge. It was about transformation. And choosing to become. No matter what they called you. No matter who walked away. No matter how hard it gets. You rise. And when you do, don't look back unless it's to smile at how far you've come. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks back into a room they pushed you out of, head high, smile quiet, and purpose unshakable. That was me 6 years after Daniel left me at my lowest. Standing at the doors of the same firm where they once called me a liability. Only this time I wasn't someone's plus one. I was the keynote speaker. Stratex International, Daniel's former playground, had invited me to headline their annual innovation forum. Irony had a cruel sense of humor. The company that once turned their backs now needed the mind they underestimated. I stepped onto the marble stage in a navy silk pantsuit. Nothing flashy, just elegant strength. The lights hit my face and for a moment, the silence in the auditorium wrapped around me like a challenge. I met their eyes. Some of them remembered me. The wife. The quiet girl. But the woman before them wasn't the echo of anyone. She was her own headline now. My name is Brielle, I began, and 6 years ago, I walked through these halls with a man who told me I wasn't enough. Today I return, not as his wife, but as proof that resilience rewrites everything. The applause didn't come immediately. They didn't need to. They were listening. Because this wasn't about ego. It was about impact. My talk wasn't personal, it was purposeful. I spoke about building from scratch, about turning broken dreams into blueprints. I spoke about women being the architects of their own legacies. About not waiting to be chosen when you were always capable of choosing yourself. When I walked off the stage, the entire room stood. But one pair of eyes caught mine. Daniel. He was in the crowd. Older. Worn around the edges. His once crisp posture was dulled by time and what I imagined was regret. He didn't approach me that day. But later I heard he was no longer with the firm. Word was, after the divorce and the business missteps, he'd struggled to stay afloat. Not that I celebrated that. I had no space left in my heart for bitterness. Just boundaries. 2 months later, I was approached by a media agency to do a feature story. From Forgotten to Fearless, the rise of Brielle Kane. They wanted to know everything. The fall, the heartbreak, the betrayal. But I didn't give them that. Instead, I gave them the becoming. I told them about the nights I went to bed with more tears than courage and still woke up. About the jobs I took to pay rent while building a dream no one could see but me. About the woman who once doubted her voice, now mentoring others to find theirs. The article went viral. Not because of my pain, but because of my power. Suddenly my inbox was filled with messages. Women who'd been left, lied to, stepped on. Women who thought they were the only ones crying in bathroom stalls or doubting their worth in rooms filled with suits and silence. And I realized, this wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. That's when I founded Rise and Reign, a platform dedicated to women who were starting over, not just in love but in life. Career coaching, legal resources, wellness programs. A community not of survivors, but of successors. It didn't matter who tried to write us off. We were writing our own endings now. And success. It wasn't just revenue or recognition. It was walking past the places that broke you with peace in your stride. It was hearing your name not in gossip but in gratitude. It was knowing that no matter how they tried to define you, they didn't get the final word. That belonged to you. Now, whenever I look back, I don't see Daniel's shadow. I see the woman who rose from it. A woman who was once discarded, now determining the terms. They said I was too soft, too emotional, too dependent. No. I'm the one they quote, the one they consult, the one they never saw coming. Because while they were busy watching me break, I was learning how to build. And I built something they can't tear down. Not with doubt. Not with words. Not with anything. Because the best revenge is living so powerfully they have to whisper your name in awe. If you've ever been underestimated, discarded, or called a burden, know this. Your worth was never up for debate. Let your silence turn to strategy. Let your pain turn to purpose. Let your comeback be louder than their betrayal ever was. And when you rise, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because your story, your voice, your journey might just be the reason another woman doesn't give up.